On this episode, pro wrestling historian of EatSleepWrestle.com with dozens of books to his credit, including the biography of Dr. David Schultz, Lord Leslie Carton, the Black Panther Jim Mitchell, and Kenny Starmaker Bolin. John Cosper joins me to discuss My Life in Heaventown by J.J Maguire and John Cosper, and it's happening right now.
The Everett Lee Show podcast, a shot of entertainment.
John Cosper, man, how you been? It's been a while since we last spoke on text message there, right before the true master of wrestling ring music, Hurricane J.J Maguire, passed away. How you been?
I'm doing well. How about yourself, Everett?
Not too bad. Hanging in there, enjoying this weather today here in Daytona. It's been raining all day today. How's it looking up on your end there up in Kentucky?
We're not super hot yet. We got a little bit of rain today, but other than that, it's been nice. Hoping tomorrow's a good day. We'll see.
Yeah. It's I didn't expect all of having this rain today here when I was out and about, and it's just been coming down in like waves, just pouring, just like the floodgates opening up, and then it quits. Florida weather. It gets sunny, and it rains again, sunny, and it's pretty much stopped for the most part. But besides that, man, I been checking out some interviews that you've been doing on other podcasts. I recently checked out the interview you did on Deathmatch Russell podcast with David C. Russell. That was great. I learned quite a bit on that episode right there. And one thing I do want to mention or ask is that you've been a wrestling historian and writing biographies and books for quite some time now.
Mm-hmm. Yes, sir. I'll coming up on 10 years actually in December when I started my first book.
Oh, nice. That's amazing. I love it, man. I love it. And you pretty much, it seems like it's just out of nowhere you come out with a book on different things. It's just like, wow, it's like, what's John coming up with next? And here comes a book, another historian fact about someone in the world of wrestling, which I find really interesting with the books that you have on your website, EatSleepWrestle.com. And you just write so many great tales. And one of the great tales that I want to discuss with you tonight is that the last conversation I had with the true master of wrestling ring music, Hurricane J.J Maguire, and the conversation that we had was with you coming on and him at the same time discussing his book right here, My Life in Heaventown. And that was the last conversation I had with him. And he said, get Cosper on your podcast. And I'm doing the wishes. His last conversation that we had is get you on and talk about his book, because I've had him on before he passed. The last couple of times I had him on my podcast, and we did briefly talk about the book. But telling you, John, this past Christmas, this right here was the best Christmas gift I got. My wife went behind my back, got a hold of JJ and said, I want to get him a copy of your book for Christmas. And she went all the way out to get it signed, to get the book signed.
Wow, that's awesome.
Yeah, I was almost in tears. I didn't expect this, man. And I read this book and I spent a lot of my nights. It took me a while to read it, but I got through the book. And I contacted JJ after I got done reading it, and I told him I loved it. And there's some favorite parts in this book, which we'll discuss here while we talk about his book here, My Life in Heaventown. And first off, how did this come about? How did you meet the true master of wrestling ring music? How did that come about, meeting J.J. Maguire and getting in contact with him? How did that happen?
That happened thanks to actually another podcaster, a friend of mine named Robin Nelson, put us together. Robin had interviewed me for his podcast, and we hit it off, and he really enjoyed kind of telling the stories about old time wrestling and everything. And he said, "Man, you got to meet J.J. Maguire. It's like he's down there in Kentucky. He's not too far from you." And he would just you guys would really hit it off. And so he either gave me his number or him my number, and we called and we had a conversation one day for maybe an hour and a half. He told me a lot of stories about his life, and it wasn't even about doing a book, because at the time he was working with Jim Phillips, who I think was right for the gorilla position at that time, and he and Jim were working on the book. So yeah, it wasn't even anything like that. It was just a matter of just making a connection. JJ and I met up in Richmond, Kentucky for a Comic-Con, and I just invited him to come down. Hey, why don't you come down? You can set up, put your pictures out, and whatever else you want to sell. I'm going to have my books, just as a chance to hang out. My son was just starting to play piano at that time, so I took him down with me, and the three of us just kind of hung out for the day at the Comic-Con. Just had a real good time, and just kind of built a friendship. And JJ reached out to me one day. He said, "Hey, things are, not. It looks like we're going to need to move on and find a different writer. Just things weren't working out with Jim at that time." And he had a conversation with Jim. I had a conversation with Jim, and Jim and I actually hadn't met until that time, and the two of us hit it off and have become really good buds. And matter of fact, he was down at the memorial with me when JJ passed down in Somerset. And just an awesome guy and a really fantastic writer in his own right. I'm very, very fortunate that I was in the right position at the right time. But JJ and I started working together and collaborating, and helped them to get the book finished from there.
Nice. Yeah, because when I talked with JJ, he said he was going to have Jim do it, but some stuff was happening on Jim's end, and therefore he went with you. And one of the things about this book I love at the beginning of it, the opening introduction, Jim Phillips has the opening on the introduction here, which I thought was great. And just reading this opening on him discussing and talking about JJ, and I love that. I love that he put his introduction in. You put his introduction in there, and then after the introduction, it has a forward from the Mouth of the South, Jimmy Hart, right there. Now, how did that happen? Did you reach out to Jimmy about that right there?
Jim had actually done that legwork, and he actually sent me the audio from his conversation with Jimmy. So it was Jim Phillips who had reached out to Jimmy and gotten Jimmy's words, and then I was the one that ended up finishing that up for him. I have met and talked to Jimmy since that time. Actually, since JJ's passed, we've talked on the phone a few times, and then we ran into each other down in Ashland, Kentucky, not too long ago. And it was always, I always had one side of the story and one side of the conversation about J.J. Maguire and Jimmy Hart. I remember sitting in a hotel room with him in Fort Wayne, Indiana, before Heroes and Legends, big event Jason Maples holds twice a year up there. And JJ's on the phone and Jimmy's on the other lines. "Now, Maguire, you got to make sure you dress up for this thing." "Oh, I will, Jimmy." "Well, what are you wearing tomorrow?" "Well, I've got my coat and I've got my shades and I got my hat and everything." So, you got to look nice. The fans are coming out. They're spending good money to meet you. And it was just like any other tag team that has spent 20 years on the road together. They're an old married couple. And, it was just fun sitting and eavesdropping and listening in on that. And then getting to talk with Jimmy since then, and just get to hear just how much Jimmy just thought the world of JJ was great. We had always wanted to do a show. I had always wanted to do a show with the two of them. There've been talks about doing some stuff down in Tampa, and a lot of that kind of got put on hold from COVID. The show that was in Ashland, Kentucky, where I saw JJ about a month ago, or Jimmy about a month ago, actually a couple days before JJ passed, I had called and left him a voicemail and said, "Hey, I'm going to the show in Ashland. Jimmy's going to be there. You got to come with me." And was so excited to finally get a chance to hang out with the both of them together. And Jimmy and I, of course, had a nice conversation. And I had brought a bunch of JJ's books down with me, and Jimmy grabbed a Sharpie and he signed every single one of them. With JJ's signatures in the book from where I had him sign some book plates that I could just put into the books. And I had maybe 9 of them left at the time. Jimmy signed every one of them. I got back home, put them on the website. It didn't mark them up or anything like that. I mean, it was not looking to make a profit. It was just, at this point, the royalties are going to his kids. But Jimmy was like, I want to do this for his kids. And they sold out in less than 24 hours. It was pretty awesome, Jimmy, to do that.
Wow, that's amazing. That is awesome. I like that right there. I like the fact that you got to hang out with the Mouth of the South, Jimmy Hart, and J.J. Maguire. I think that's amazing. Just watching both of them interact with each other, ain't that amazing how they interact?
Yeah, like I said, Jimmy was on the phone, so it was just listening in on that conversation, and that was the closest I got to hanging out with him was that phone call and listening to him and Jimmy go back and forth. And again, it was just like any old tag team. It was just an old married couple, and Jimmy making sure JJ was doing everything right. So
right. One of the memories I have is I don't know if JJ talked about this with you. He came down back in January 2019 and he stayed at my house here, and he stayed with me for a week. We went over to Jimmy Hart's Hall of Fame Bar and Grill when he had it here in Daytona Beach, and we went out there. It was on a Sunday night, and at that time I think it was the 2019 Royal Rumble was happening, so we went in there and watched pay-per-view. JJ got to meet a really good friend of mine, Tommy, who put up his wrestling boots last year. He did one last run, but he got to develop a friendship with my friend Tommy, which was great. And we were waiting for Jimmy because Jimmy just got in late from an appearance somewhere. But when Jimmy came in and JJ, when they saw each other and they gave each other a big hug, it was like almost like they were brothers. My friend Tommy said, man, these guys are almost like brothers. That's like, yeah. I said they are, man. I mean, just everything about them. And it was Jimmy was great with like faces, but not with names. So after everything was over, he was telling everyone goodbye. Thank you for coming out. He comes up to me. He's like, hey, baby, thanks for coming out. And I was like, okay. And when he walks off, I'm thinking to myself, I'm like, he don't know that I drove JJ out here. So after everyone left, we ended up talking, and JJ was like, yeah, I'm here with Denver. And he's like, oh, you're here with him. Oh, okay. It's like so JJ handed me a camera, and we shot that one promo you've seen there with Jimmy. Yeah. I was the camera guy. I was lucky enough. I was the camera guy. He handed me the camera, and I told JJ, I said, whatever you need, just tell me. I'm here for you. And he was like, well, stand here, hold the camera. And I did that. And he showed me how to operate it. After it was done with it, John, Jimmy said, hey, let's go up the street here and let's, go to the Waffle House. You hungry? It's like, okay. So we jumped in the car. We drove down Daytona Beach shores there, down the road a ways. And 12:30 in the morning, best memory, John, sitting at the Waffle House, Daytona Beach shores, in between Jimmy Hart and J.J. Maguire, listening to them talk about their time in the Gentrys to wrestling.
Man, yeah. Just being the fly on the wall, those moments is great. So I've got a similar video story. It was at first StarCast, and I was there with Dr. D. David Schultz, selling copies of his book, and Hurricane Helms was there, who is a self-described huge Dr. D fan. He said his first wrestling gear ever was the singlet with just the one strap, just because he loved Dr. D so much. And he came over and he pitched, an idea. He said, I want to shoot a video with you where I come over as my core character, and I'm looking for a story, and I run into you, and you ask me if I got a kind of question for you, and I say, no, sir, I don't, and just kind of playing on the whole Stossel thing. And David did not want to do it. He was just like, I was like that. And I was like, David, you're doing this. Okay. You're doing this for him. He's a huge fan of yours and everything. So I got to hold her and film the video of him walking around. I've got it on my YouTube channel. Or, this is Hurricane Gregory Helms, ace reporter, and I'm looking for the story here at StarCast. He walks around, runs to David, you got a question for me? Oh, sir. Oh, no. And he just wanders off. Just a great little moment. And to get to participate in that was really cool. So I also got to do that with JJ and Jimmy. And I got to tell you, I'm envious because I never got that chance just to hang out with two of them and side by side. And I know there was just so much love and so much friendship between the two of them.
Oh yeah. There was so much between both of them, and just hearing the interactions and just listen to the stories, to Gentry's time on the road, to them talking about wrestling. It was more a lot about Gentry's, which I got to know more about and stuff, and them on the road and everything. And the reason why we went to a Waffle House, and that was a great story right there. Just listening to them talking about it, because when they were in the Gentry's, the only thing that was open when they were traveling from town to town was a Waffle House. So that's where they got accustomed to. Jimmy did, and just hearing those type of stories there, it was almost like listening, and or not listening, but reading the stories right here in the book here. It's great listening. I mean, I keep saying listening. Well, I'll tell you why. Because when I'm reading this, it's like I can hear JJ talking. You ever read a book and after someone and how they sound? Yep,
I know exactly what you mean. So
it's like
listen to a lot of Michael Lewis's podcast, and I'm reading Moneyball finally, and I just hear Michael Lewis's voice reading it to me. So, but I totally get it, and I appreciate that as well. So, that's one of your goals, is to try to capture somebody's voice and to tell it in their own words and their own inflection. So, but I appreciate that.
Yeah, this is really great, because I did not want to put this book down. John. The one thing I like is the introduction. When it starts out, JJ explains where he grew up at. He explained, growing up in Kentucky there. He explained what his father did and his mother did, and life growing up, and him getting into music, because he got into music at an early age, and even talking conversations with him, he even talked about that. What was some of the stuff that he did talk about at an early age, getting into music?
He talked about this is one of the things about JJ is just the gratitude he had for the people who helped him along the way, and he remembered every piano teacher he ever had by name, and when he started with them and everything, and just the folks that he knew in Somerset growing up who encouraged him and gave him opportunities along the way. He started at a very, very early age, as you said, and was performing at a very early age. I loved his stories too about his days as an amateur magician and getting to come on stage with Harry Blackstone. Was a really cool story, but that was one thing I picked up on JJ right away was just the gratitude he had for the people who had helped him, and the pride that he had in where he came from, and the people who had helped him to get where he was, and his family as well. Just a whole lot of pride in his siblings and his mom and his dad. He's got a lot of great stories in there about his father getting to act in a couple of movies later on in life, and just someone who had a lot of gratitude for the things he had gotten to experience in his life.
I loved when he's talking about getting into bands when he was young, and teenagers when he was getting into bands, because getting to know him over time, over the few years I got to know him, he did talk about with me when he was starting out and playing in bands and stuff, but actually reading more about it in the book, hearing more about it as I've read, it just fascinated me that he was in a band. He was in the Sounds Unlimited.
Sounds Unlimited. Yep.
Yeah, I always kept saying that, and he always corrected me. Sounds Unlimited. I always wanted to call it Unlimited Sounds.
Yeah.
It's nice little name there, and he was with that band there, and then eventually he made his way on to getting to audition for the Gentry's, because the Gentry's was looking for a drummer. And from what Jimmy said in the introduction, and even in the chapter when he was talking about the Gentrys, John, him meeting Jimmy Hart and on a phone, it was with a phone call first, and then they met in person there. I find that fascinating right there, how the audition went right there, because just the way, just reading that right there, you didn't know if he was or wasn't, but of course he did. But when you had conversations with John talking about the Gentrys, what was some of the stuff that he talked about when he was, in the early days of being with the Gentrys after auditioning and getting into the band as the drummer?
He talked a little bit about some of the touring they did and what it was like being on the road with that band. It was really a very much a bonding experience for him and Jimmy on the road. They were kind of similar in their personalities and things they like to do after a show and after hours. And they were both very, very serious about their craft, and they were songwriters, And ultimately, I mean, you could say they're the Lennon and McCartney of the WWF. I mean, one thing that was really cool to me about getting to do this book was I had actually reached out when Jim Johnston got his future endeavors from the WWE just to see if he'd be interested in doing a book. And at that time he wasn't looking for anything like that. But I listened to a podcast he was on with Sean Mooney, and Sean would ask him about different songs. He's like, well, tell me about when you wrote Sexy Boy. Like, well, that was Jimmy Hart and J.J. Maguire. Well, how about when you wrote the Honky Tonk Man theme? That was Jimmy Hart and J.J. Maguire. And, most of the ones he was at, until he got to the Attitude Era, it was mostly Jimmy Hart, J.J. Maguire. It really kind of laid the foundation for, the rest of their lives as collaborators. And you've read the book, a lot of the chapters started out with, my phone rang and it was Jimmy Hart. And Jimmy Hart said, Hulk Hogan just called me, So Hulk calls Jimmy calls JJ. We're doing some music. It's going to be at WWF. It might be with WCW, or it might be with something completely new. It might be a TV show. No, that was really kind of the main thing out of the Gentrys, was just, it was that connection with Jimmy Hart. It was really kind of a life-changing connection with, finding that creative partner that you jive with, and just that best friend that you carry with for the rest of your life.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I love that. I loved reading about him with the Gentrys, and like you said, they're having that connection there with Jimmy Hart. And even after the Gentrys, one of my favorite parts out of the book was when he went to Hollywood. He went to California. Mm-hmm. That right there, I didn't get to talk too much about when he went out to California when we would talk, but reading about it in the book, I found that amazing. I even told him, I said my favorite part was when he first got out when he first got out to Hollywood. When he got to California there, he went out and he was in a restaurant, and they had him sitting right up front, and they're treating him like he's someone, like important. And he said he's just sitting there, even in the book there, he's just sitting there and he's people's waving at him as he walked in, and just treating him like he was someone. And then what I thought was funny was the hostess says like, "Oh, it's great to see you back," and he's like, "Back? I just got here in town." I was laughing as I was reading that, and he sat there and ate, and then he went out. He got a place. He got a place to stay, and he was working out there at the studio there. And I find that really interesting was all the people he got to meet out there in California, right there. One of my favorite chapters, I even told him this, was him talking about the chapter with Jackie Gleason, man. Jackie Gleason.
I mean, what an encounter. I believe that was someone he knew lived next door to Jackie Gleason, and he ended up in his basement shooting pool with Jackie Gleason. I mean, it's a little like Forrest Gump, some of the stories that he has, the people he stumbles in. I love the one where he's driving down the road and he hears a band playing inside of a roller rink, and he goes in there and there's just before he hit it big, there's Prince, you know, and then seeing John Landis, you know, catching a nap on the sidewalk while he was editing some movie, and the stories at Glen, and I love it. See, I'm a big A-Team fan, so anytime I'm watching the credit Glen Studios, and you know, up there, and he talked about George Peppard coming in to do ADR, the dialogue looping, and he's got some great stories that, you know, Kirstie Alley and Gene Simmons and Talking Cars with Henry Winkler. It's really neat, the people he got cross paths with. And we would be doing JJ a disservice, so we didn't mention the fact that he didn't get to kiss Farrah Fawcett while he was working in Glen Studios. He loved to go to that story. So, Ryan O'Neal, if you're out there, sorry. He's not with us anymore. You can't do anything about it.
Exactly. Yeah. I mean, Farrah, man. I mean, my brother had that poster. Who did not have that poster, John? Who did not have that poster? And I found out, I want to throw this out here. I was reading something recently. I was going back looking at like facts. I like looking at facts about stuff that in history that you didn't know about. And they were talking about that famous Farrah poster. Actually, that was not the picture that they were going to use. What happened was, I heard I was reading the photographer wanted to use up his last roll of film, and so he just used up all the film there, and she was just, you know, sitting there. And then when they were going across and they found that picture, they're like, "This is it, man." That's really fascinating.
Happy accidents, you know.
Yeah. I did like the story when he was talking about he got to kiss Farrah. that was great. I mean, every man
happened to a nicer guy, could it?
I know. It's like, wow. I liked when he was talking with Gene Simmons, because the movie that. If you can
Runaways.
Runaways. Where he played a villain and he didn't think it was that great, and JJ told him, it's great, man, you're great. And he had that conversation with Gene Simmons there. He had a lot of good conversations with a lot of people. I also liked it when he met the person who owned the Batmobile. When he
not owned it, the guy who built it.
Oh yeah, that's right. Yeah, the guy who built it. And then he was talking with him. He said, "Aren't you gonna ask me?" And I said, "Ask you what?" He's like, "Can I get in it?" Because it took him long enough. I thought that was really fascinating there. And another thing I found fascinating as I kept reading along there, his time out there in California was, of course, every chapter you got a call from Jimmy Hart. Hey Maguire. And then when he got into the wrestling, that started out there in Memphis there, because Jimmy was out there in Memphis and I guess wanted to do something with Jerry Lawler, if I can remember there. And then that was the door that started the Jimmy Hart and J.J. Maguire collaboration on wrestling music right there, which was pretty fascinating right there. When you were talking with him about that there, when you had a conversation with him, like getting his foot in the door, him and Jimmy getting his foot in the door first, and then Maguire followed afterwards. The stories being right there, the WWF, WWE. What was some of your thoughts there when he was talking about that, when he first got in there and they were collaborating doing music?
It was what it was interesting. It was just a gig. It was a one-off thing with Lawler. Hey, Jimmy called him up, said, "Hey, I'm doing this wrestling thing now. One of the wrestlers wants to do a single," and JJ came in and helped with that. And it wasn't like they were, "Oh, this could lead to something big." They had no idea what was going on. But it's another tribute to Memphis and just how far ahead they were of everything else, and how much the WWF ultimately, borrowed from what they had created. They were doing the video packages to introduce people. There's that classic video that they shot in the jungles of Africa, aka Jerry Jarrett's backyard, when they introduced Kamala, the Ugandan giant. There's the sharp dressed man, with the fabulous ones. All those video packages, but it was a profitable thing for wrestlers to go and record their own singles. Freddie Blassie had Pencil Neck Geek, and there were a bunch of other guys who put out singles and some put out albums, and Jerry wanted a piece of that. And Jerry was the king of Memphis. All due respect to Elvis Presley, Elvis was the king of rock and roll. Jerry was the king of Memphis. So
right.
But that was a one-off gig, and JJ was the guy Jimmy knew he could count on. He brought him in on that, and then down the road when they started working on the WWF albums, and they knew Jimmy had music experience, and they said they turned to Jimmy, and Jimmy immediately turned around and turned to JJ and said, "Hey, we got an opportunity to do some more music. Let's get up here and do some music." And again, they didn't necessarily know where it was going to lead, but I saw the gold record with my own eyes. They had it on display at the Memorial. And that was, for all of us that knew JJ through wrestling, that was one of the coolest things, was seeing the gold record for Pile Driver, sitting up there on display. That was something pretty special. And, again, they were creating, wrestling was just it was constantly churning things out. It was constantly something new and, reinventing things. And we were coming out of the territories and into this new thing of having a national promotion. This had never been done before. And, even at that time, they didn't know. I mean, it blew JJ's mind when I sent him the video clip of William Shatner singing "Sexy Boy."
Oh yeah,
Shatner had hosted Raw that one night. And they did the gag, and William Shatner sings the themes of the WWF. And of course, he grew up in the '60s. He was a huge Star Trek fan, and I mean, the fact that not only is that song probably the most played of all wrestling themes, ever. But it's still adored by fans. Fans still go nuts for it. We all have it on our iPods, and then there's William Shatner, Captain Kirk himself, singing a song you co-wrote. I mean, it was fun to share that with him and get his reaction to it.
Yeah, that was amazing. I think he sent me the clip too, and he said, "Hey, check this out. John Cosper said this to me." And I said, "What?" I said, "What am I watching?" I watched it. I about fell over and died laughing. I thought that was amazing. I
think he did that one, and he did Cena's, and he did Rey Mysterio's. I don't think he obviously didn't get the vibe of Ray's and John's anyway, but he definitely, I think, was feeling "Sexy Boy" more than the others. It kind of fit Shatner's vibe as well.
Mm-hmm. Talking about Shawn Michaels, when I had him here, when he stayed at my house for a week, we were up late talking about wrestling, talking about music, and I said to JJ, I said, "How much do you know about your music being on YouTube?" And he said to me, honestly, "I never really looked." So I said, "Come on, let's sit down here at the computer." I got on the computer, got on YouTube, and he started naming off songs. And I'd look and go to a video of it, because a lot of fan people throw a picture up or some animation thing. And he said, "Check the description." And it put a smile on his face that they credited J.J. Maguire or John Maguire, Jimmy Hart. And he's like, "Okay, that's good," because he was just checking just to make sure, because like you said with not Jim Phillips, but John Johnson, that a lot of people thought John Johnson did. So he was happy with the ones. And then when it came to "Sexy Boy," so I pulled that up, and he got, of course, they put the writing credit on there. They said this was done by Jimmy Hart, J.J. Maguire. And I had to pinch myself here for a minute, John. I'm listening to "Sexy Boy," a song I've heard a million times. And the man that wrote it and played it is sitting right next to me.
Yeah.
That was an experience right there. That was such an experience there. He did, in the book, mention when he started talking about the themes that he did. I found it was interesting, because a lot of the stuff I knew from when he talked about, but hearing him talk about it as the time went on, as I got to know him, and even reading about it again, it just reading it in the book there, how he did different things, because he did in the book mention there was two versions of "Sexy Boy," because the first version had Sherry Martel singing on it, and then later on, it was Sean singing on it, which I thought was great. I liked how he came up with the idea when they came up with the idea for the $1 Million Man, Ted DiBiase. I love that, and even Jimmy Superfly Snuka, and just how they were right there. Him and Jimmy Hart was right there, ready to record music right there when it was needed. Have it done, boom, right there, sent out right there on the fly. I found that was amazing. And even when Hulk Hogan, the relationship, I liked the story that was in there about Hulk Hogan, the relationship that he had with Hulk Hogan. Even when Hogan left wrestling and went and started doing TV, Thunder in Paradise. John, was probably about 15 at the time. And when I first saw the first TV movie, A Thunder in Paradise, I loved it. I thought it was great because I never seen anything like this. And then all the years later, talking with JJ and talking about the time he had on Thunder in Paradise, which I thought was great because he discussed that in the book there, the relationship, developed a relationship with the cast, and even how he got the gig to do the theme on that, which I love right there. Let's talk a little bit about that right there, the theme, how he got onto the show Thunder in Paradise there.
Yeah, I believe he was pulled into, I think they were looking into a secondary theme or maybe an end credits theme for it, which when they recorded, it was Vince Neil of Motley Crue who did the lyrics. It was never actually used for the show, but years later when he went to work for Kentucky's Own Wrestling, he used it for his entrance theme. So, here's a guy in Somerset, Kentucky, which is, I'm a good hour from the next nearest biggest city, Lexington, Kentucky, which is not that big. And here's a guy, again, the impresario of pro wrestling music. He's got his own original entrance theme, and who's singing the lyrics to it but Vince Neil of Motley Crue, which was cool. But you mentioned the story about him getting the gig and actually becoming a part of the cast. He played the part of Tone Deaf, and he and Jimmy got to do some music actually on the show. And it was, the producers saw him, they liked the look, and they said, we want to put you in the show. And he said, I don't have any clothes. They said, we'll go to Walmart. He had to go and buy a whole wardrobe, and they got him a hotel room to stay there. And one of my favorite parts of that is JJ and I both had an affection for spy movies and spy TV shows of the 1960s, and Bond fans, and both big fans of the Avengers, not the Marvel Avengers, the British Avengers. John Steed and Mrs. Emma Peel, Patrick Macnee and Diana Rigg, and of course Patrick Macnee was a cast member on Thunder in Paradise, and another pinch me moment for him because he was actually working and hanging out with Patrick Macnee with John Steed himself from the original TV show, and I always thought that was just the coolest. I'm a huge fan of that show, just a huge everything about that era and that style, and he was just in heaven getting to spend time with them. And of course, every other week they had Brutus Spartan Beefcake was out there, Sting, and all of Hogan's wrestling buddies and stuff like that. And who's John most excited about? But a star from the 1960s. And, I was just another Forrest Gump moment for him. He's just in the right place at the right time, and somebody spotted him and said, "Hey, you know what? We can use that guy on the show." And Thunder in Paradise was never released as an entire series. I think there's only 13 episodes made. There is a DVD out there that has 3 episodes, and he is right at the beginning of that 3rd episode. It's him and Jimmy in a tiki bar surrounded by a bunch of girls in bikinis, and Jimmy's singing and JJ's playing keyboards. And I don't remember Jimmy's character name, but Tone Deaf was the name of JJ's character. By golly, that's him right there.
I love that right there. I even like the story in there when they were doing press, where they went to talk about, I guess, doing a Thunder in Paradise video game, and Hogan flew out, Hulk flew out there, or they flew out to where they were doing the thing for the talking about the Thunder in Paradise video game. Hogan ends up leaving, and him, JJ, and Jack Lennon's son, I always forget his name, who was on the show too. they both stayed and entertained the crowd there and did song, played some music, which was great there. And then when Hogan, when he left, before he left, he gave JJ his room key. He's like, here, stay in my room. And he stayed in his room. And the next morning, I guess room service or housekeeping decided to come in without knocking, and they're trying to get a peek of Hogan, and all of a sudden they find JJ. It's like, you're not Hogan. It's like, yeah, he left a long time ago. I thought that was great. And I liked it when he was talking about he got to meet Carol Alt. Man, Carol Alt, she was a really beautiful, she still is beautiful, supermodel, and she got into acting, being an actress, and him getting to dance with her and getting to talk with her, and just his time on the show there. And like you said, yeah, it ran 13 episodes, and then they finally the show got canceled. And then Hogan gets back in the wrestling. He goes to WCW. And one of the things I find fascinating was he even talked about in the book, and there's even a picture right here in the book, is when Hogan did his contract signing it's Hollywood Studios, but now it's back then it was known as MGM Studios out here in Orlando. J.J. Maguire got to drive the Viper.
Yep. JJ's driving the car, driving Hogan right there in the driver's seat. I love that photo of him. So it's just the cool places he got to go in the places he ended up. And again, just right place, right time, and something he was just always grateful for those moments that he had.
Yeah, that's one of my things that I like right there. Him talking about the Viper, and just one of those moments he got to do. And even when he came down here, John, when he was down here in 2019, we went out to Hogan's Beach Shop, and right there at Hogan's Beach Shop was the Viper, man. And he got right in there, and it was neat. And I did send a video and show, and then I talked to him about it, that later on Hogan did auction out the Viper for charity, and for a good charity. I forget the name of the charity, but he auctioned it off, which I thought was great. But when I saw that Viper and I saw the video of it getting auctioned off, all I could say to myself was, J.J. Maguire got to drive that. Yeah. He got to drive that. He got to drive that Viper, which I thought was really interesting there. I thought that was pretty cool.
We can't forget the wrestling boot band.
Oh yes, yes. We can't.
And
forget that.
I'll tell you, that was one of the things that made it most special for me, because I mentioned. This was the last call I was on. I don't know. I had a buddy of mine who had moved in with me summer 2004, and lived with me for a couple months, brought his entire wrestling library, all of his videotapes, all of his DVDs, and all of his books. That was when I read, Have a Nice Day. That was when I read Foley is Good, and all that kind of stuff, and kind of laid the seed work for years later when I would get into writing about wrestling myself. But he had a CD that had like hundreds and hundreds of MP3s of wrestling themes, and he had his CD player in his car would play MP3s. So we listened to a lot of wrestling themes that summer, but one album that we wore out was that Hulk Hogan and the Wrestling Boot Band album, that Hulk Rules album. It was our jam. We listened to Beach Patrol. We listened to I Want to Be a Hulkamaniac. We listened to Hulk's, Hulkamaniac and Hulkster in Heaven. And we laughed and we sang, and it was part of the soundtrack of our summer. And, that was something I shared with him and stuff. Just the memories that I had with that roommate and another friend of mine who lived up the street, who was my best friend at the time. And the three of us went everywhere. And if we weren't listening to Green Day or No Doubt or Blink 182, we were listening to the Wrestling Boot Band that summer. And that was one of the things that Jimmy Hart calls JJ and says, "Hey, Hogan just called, wants us to come over." Hogan wanted to do an album. And Jimmy was the lyrics on that album, and JJ was the music on that album. And it's obviously it's got a reputation. That there's a lot of people giving it worst album, worst wrestling songs, whatever. It's a cult classic. And
Yeah.
I mean I still enjoy it. It has a special place in my heart, not just because of JJ, but again because of that summer and me and my friends listening to it. And, they're catchy songs. I mean, they're fun. I mean, I just
They are.
In the house. I mean, and watching the videos, there's JJ playing the guitar and everything, and I mean, just some really. Some fun memories for me, but a really fun time for him as well. Again, getting to collaborate with Jimmy and be on the road. You get to be on the road in the band with Hulk Hogan.
Exactly. I like how Hogan said, "Hey, I wanted to start a band," and from that phone call from Jimmy, "Hey, I want to start a band," and it went from there. And one of the things
it was like the Rat Pack. It was like the stories you hear. There's a story I heard where they're all staying at a resort, and Sammy Davis Jr.'s door comes flying open, and Dean Martin's door comes flying open, and they go running across. So it's like, what's going on? Frank's awake. So Hogan says, "Hey, I want to do something." It's like Jimmy and JJ are there. It's like, "What are we doing, boss?" They had a great collaboration. They had a great time, and produced a really fun album.
Yeah, the songs are catchy. When he came down in 2019, when he was down here and he stayed with us, and we went out and we had Podcast City Network 1 year anniversary. J.J. Maguire performed there, and he performed the whole album of the Wrestling Boot Band. And what was cool was a friend that was there who was helped running the sound that night there for a band that we had that was performing for 1 year anniversary show, the Craig Thompson Project. In between when they took their break, that's when JJ got up there and he performed the Wrestling Boot Band. And a friend of mine that was there running sound, Tyler's a big rock metal guy, and when he was sitting there watching JJ perform, I walked over to him. I was like, "Hey man, what's up?" And he goes, "Man, this is the greatest moment of my life." He said, "I'm taken back to the 80s and it's awesome." And he was just in awe watching JJ perform the Wrestling Boot Band's album. And he loved that, and he really marked out John when JJ got up there and he played drums for the song "I Shot the Sheriff" with the Craig Thompson Project. Yeah, it was a great night, and those songs they're catchy. They're definitely catchy. And one of the gifts that JJ gave me was a signed autograph of the Wrestling Boot picture of the Wrestling Boot Band with Mr. Hurricane J.J. Maguire right there, which I keep up here on my desk. And I keep this book right here at my desk. It's been sitting here ever since, when I heard that he passed away, and even after I finished reading the book, it stayed here, and it's been here ever since. I've just right here. I see it every day. But there for a while. I mean, even after Hogan getting back into wrestling, WCW there, and then JJ kind of went, I guess, out of wrestling, but he ended up back in the wrestling there with he went back to Kentucky, KCW, Kentucky's Own Wrestling. He got back in there, and that was a pretty good part there, where he talked about his time in KCW there, wasn't it?
Yeah, JJ got involved down there with his Kentucky's Own Wrestling, was running at the time, and just some really awesome people down there, just kind of keeping old school wrestling alive. I was actually just telling a story about that in the one show I went down and sold books at. And, Tracy's book, JJ's book was out at the time, and Tracy Smothers and I were getting ready to start on his own book. And just to give you an idea of the kind of crowd you have down there in Somerset, Kentucky, it's blazing hot. It's middle of summer. We're in a high school gymnasium. It's packed out. There's no air conditioning. conditioning. It's just hot and sweaty and miserable. And the main event that night is a 5-on-5 in a steel cage. And Tracy Smothers inexplicably is on the side of the baby faces that night. But as soon as the match is over, he grabs a 2x4 and he goes after the leader of the baby faces. And some guy in the front row screams out, "He's double crossed him!" So kayfabe was real down there at KZW. But JJ came in and they made him the master of ceremonies. He was the host. He kicked off the show every night. He had the hat, he had the glasses, he had the coat. JV Hart would have been proud. Came out to that Thunder in Paradise theme with Vince Neil blasting it over the speakers. He had them all doing that, and it was a chance for him to kind of reconnect with wrestling. He did that right around the time his kids were getting old enough that they had friends that were wrestling fans and were reading the liner notes, and they were saying, "Dad, are you the John Maguire who wrote all? We know you know Jimmy Hart. Are you the John Maguire that wrote these songs?" And JJ was a very, very humble guy, but he had some pride about him as well. And yes, I am the guy that wrote those songs. And it was kind of when he started putting his name out there, and just to get the recognition and to acknowledge the fans, and the fans certainly did respond and appreciate. And what a special thing for that small community. It was, there's not a lot of money down there in that area of Kentucky, but, they would spend their money for those tickets and come out there and, get to, shake hands with J.J. Maguire, take pictures with him and everything. There were a lot of guys that he really kind of helped along in the wrestling business, young guys and even some older guys who, they needed to pick me up. They needed some encouragement, and JJ kind of filled that role for them. Much the same way Tracy Smothers would have, or Madman Pondo, or some of the other guys that I've worked with that are always positive and encouraging. And he was really a great presence in that locker room. He was a great presence at those shows, and he was having a ball. The one time I was down there watching him, he was having a ball doing it.
That's amazing. Just to hear the stories about KCW, and you were there at that main event with the Team JJ versus Team Darkness Worldwide going up against David Barnabas Spector.
That's right. That's what it was. Yes, sir. Yeah.
The
great David Barnabas Spector, another guy I can't say enough good things about.
Yeah. JJ gave him his break in getting into wrestling, because right now I would have to say David Barnabas Spector, his home base is FGW, Future Great Wrestling, out of Hamilton, Ohio, but he hasn't been there in the last few months. I watch FGW every Wednesday night when I can. If not, I watch it the following day or after the replays, because it comes on Wednesday nights at 7 p.m. on their YouTube channel. But David's not been there for a while. David's been booked all over the place, and David will tell you, David Barnabas Spector will tell you that it was J.J. Maguire gave him a chance right there at KZW to do what he does as being one of the great wrestling managers that he is, that he proclaims to be. David does. But kayfabe in it there.
I see a lot of potential for us to have a new renaissance of the wrestling management in the business. I was watching Stokely Hathaway on AEW the other night. I'd never heard of him, and I heard he signed last week, and I was like, oh, he's really good. I like what he's doing. And David certainly has. He's got the look, he's got the charisma, and he's got the love of the business and the desire to do well. He's a student of the game. He's a student of the history. A phenomenal person too. Just it's somebody I would want to have in my locker room if I were foolish enough to want to be a wrestling promoter.
Yeah,
he's the kind of guy I'd want around. So
exactly.
No, I think the world of David, and David was one of the guys that showed up for the memorial service and spoke, and he gave all the credit in the world to JJ for encouraging him and helping him to kind of come out of his shell, kind of figure out who he is as a wrestling personality, and certainly he owes a lot to JJ, and it's something JJ really loved doing, was pouring himself into those younger talent.
He did. He loved putting people over. He'd put anything JJ believed in. He'd put it over. He would put it over. He'd sit there and tell people about my podcast here, and say Everett Lee's the Encyclopedia of Wrestling, and I'm like, I was like, I appreciate that, JJ, but I was like, it's like, all right, now how do I hold myself up to that there? But
he was hellbound and determined he was going to get BTS named Kentucky Colonels in the state of Kentucky. When he latched on to something that he was passionate about and he believed in, he went after. He didn't hold back. So he was always equally supportive of me as well.
Yeah, he many conversations I had with JJ, he always talked about, he always put you over. He always tell me that I spoke with John the other day. It was during the process of this book right here. Yeah, I spoke to John. I'd call JJ or text him. I wouldn't hear nothing. And the thing about J.J. Maguire, you call or text him, he would get back to you. I no matter what time it was, he would get back with you because he wanted to see what you wanted, how you doing, and everything. And there was times during when you were collaborating with him, getting in the process of this book here, I would call or text him. I wouldn't hear nothing for a while, and then he would call me back and say, "Hey, I was on the phone with Cosper. Where the book's coming along pretty good." He'd let me know as the time went on how the book was going, and he'd briefly tell me about this or that in the book, not too much, or I didn't ask, if from what I can remember there. And the book, it's towards the end there, it was really good, where he talked about everything that he did, every place he got to travel the world, and he thanked wrestling for that, giving him that opportunity there, because one of the stories he did talk about was going over to England for SummerSlam there, because that was a big deal. That SummerSlam there, I think it was SummerSlam 1990, if I remember, or 91 or 92. I'm trying to remember there, because
I'm working with Gregory Iron on the book. He can tell us.
Because I know the main event for that SummerSlam was brother versus brother-in-law. It was Bret the Hitman Hart going up against Davey Boy Smith with the Intercontinental Championship, and that was such a great story right there. But he talked about how he became a colonel, and he got to go over there and got there before Vince and the boys did, and he's in the lobby sitting there, and Vince walks in. He's like, "Maguire, how'd you get here?" And he said, "Hey boss, how you doing?" I love that story right there. His time talking about
no pretentiousness about. I mean, and no, who else is going to be that casual than Vince McMahon, right?
Vince is like,
I mean, he was just,
yeah.
JJ was just regular folks. He treated everybody the same with love and respect. So, and with the possible exception of Jim Johnson, not a crossword to say about anybody else on the planet. So,
yes, I know about that. Because I'm not going to repeat anything on air because I know.
No, certainly not. So
I knew.
No, he did have. There was a good story about when they were working on the demolition theme.
Yeah,
and they intentionally left a certain chord unresolved, and they did it in a way that didn't resolve properly, but anybody with an ear for music would know how to fix it. And they went and they played it for Rick Derringer, and Rick Derringer's like, "Well, what if you did this right here?" And they did it just so they could get that credit. Jimmy Hart, J.J. Maguire, and Rick Derringer.
Yes, to get that writing credit. That's one of my favorite stories there. They did that on purpose, and Jimmy said, Jimmy told JJ, he's like, "No, man." He's like, "We'll have him fill that part in. We'll share a writing credit with him," which was amazing there. I love that. And I loved how the book, when it goes to the end there at the book here, I want to flip over here to end here, because he basically said right here at the last paragraph, "God gave me talent. It took me to the greatest show on earth. I traveled the world with the greatest of all time, unbelievably entertained people of all color and all walks of life. Who knew that wrestling is such a powerful force? I did." That right there was just amazing right there, and it was all because of wrestling right there. It was all because of wrestling. Wrestling gave him that opportunity, and wrestling has opened up the doors, a lot of doors, and along his career that he had there, and it gave him just possibilities of where he went and what he did with his life. And this book here, My Life in Heaventown, is there a favorite section? Do you have a favorite part out of this book? What sticks out the most out of this book here, that your favorite part that you enjoyed the most?
I kind of have a soft spot for those Thunder in Paradise stories, and him getting to, the time he spent with his hero Patrick McNee. The thing that sticks out to me from the book is just JJ's, again, his gratitude for everything he got to do in his life. Just thankful for the gifts that he had, thankful for the opportunities that came his way, for the people that helped him along the way. I've lost two people that I got to collaborate with on books, and the thing I took away from Tracy Smothers was just the love he had for everybody, and the way he just poured himself out and loved on everybody. And with JJ, it was just that gratitude. More than the book, I'm grateful that I had a friendship with JJ. Grateful I had a relationship with this guy and got to know him, and just take encouragement from him. Anytime he pick up the phone, well, hello, Gorgeous John, how you doing? I don't know why he picked up the Gorgeous John thing. It was just his thing, and it was Gorgeous John from then on. But he was somebody I look forward to talking to. We catch up with him here and there. Last time I talked to him, I was on a treadmill at Planet Fitness, and we talked for about 28 minutes. It was probably about a week and a half before he passed. And then a week later, I had sent him a text about this show in Ashland where I had seen Jimmy Hart, and asking him if he wanted to go. And I hadn't heard back from him, but wasn't worried about it. He always got back to me and everything, and didn't really think anything of it. I was actually out with my brother-in-law and my son at a flea market on the Saturday after he had passed, and I get a text from Jamie Hemmings, who used to be with Slam Wrestling, offering condolences, and I was like, condolences on what? And had no idea that he was gone. It's just he was a guy too that if I'd be on a road trip, driving to Ashland a couple weeks ago, which is 3 hours away, and I started to get sleepy and he'd talk to somebody, I was like, oh, I'll call JJ. JJ was always free. JJ would always pick up and answer and talk. And there've been a couple times when I've been on the road driving for a bit and think, oh, I'm gonna call him. Nope, can't call him. And it just you miss a guy like that, just as he was grateful for everything, just grateful for the time I got to spend with him. Certainly wish that, some of his dreams and some of his goals and things he was hoping to do could have come to fruition. Would have loved to have had a chance to spend time with him and Jimmy, in Ashland a couple weeks ago. Would have had a blast. But grateful for the time that I had, and, grateful to get to be a part of sharing his story. I'll say, going to the memorial was his family is just wonderful, and JJ's family really embraced everybody who came, all the friends that came, and the people from wrestling, which is very much a contrast with another memorial I had gone to, where the family was almost ashamed of the person who had passed in their wrestling. But JJ's brother, JJ's kids, all his nieces and nephews, the family was just, it was a joyous time celebrating him. They were glad that people were there. They were thrilled to hear the memories, and to hear about a side of their uncle and their brother and their father that they hadn't heard. And just the love they had back for him was really heartwarming to see.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, he was loved, and he'll definitely be missed. I know, getting to know JJ and just listening to the stories of everything that he got to do in his life. And I know one thing that he always told me when we would always talk on the phone. He was so proud of his children. He was so proud of Ava and Marshall. He was so proud of them. And I mentioned that to David Barnabas Spector when I talked to him. We talked for like a couple hours on the phone right before he went to the memorial. And he mentioned it to him there that when he would talk with me, and he would tell me how proud he was of Marshall and Ava and everything that they've done in their life. And he couldn't be more happier. And John, he'll be missed. And with us talking about the book that you got to be part of and got to, get to know J.J. Maguire, we're keeping his memory alive, man. We're definitely keeping his memory alive because of everything that his contribution to the world of wrestling, to music, to just his life, man. It's just amazing. And keeping the lights on at Glen and making sure the A-Team can get that audio re-recorded. He touched on every aspect of entertainment when he was out there in Hollywood and with the WWF and beyond. So it's pretty neat. It is. And this, I enjoyed it. I enjoyed your collaboration on this book right here, My Life in Heaventown by J.J. Maguire and John Cosper. And it's a great book, man. And I'm looking forward because I've been on eatsleepwrestle.com looking at the books, all the amazing other books that you've put out there and stuff. What other books can people find on eatsleepwrestle.com that you can name off the top of your head right now?
There's quite a few. My most recent release, I put out a 10th anniversary edition of Bluegrass Brawlers, which is my first book. It is a history of wrestling in Louisville, Kentucky, starting all the way from 1877 up through the present day. We're talking about barnstormers and circus wrestlers in the late 1900s. Ed Strangler Lewis getting the name Ed Strangler Lewis in 1913. A rivalry between two theaters that ran pro wrestling shows in the late 20s and early 30s, promotion called the Allen Athletic Club that ran from 35 to 57, kind of established Tuesday night as Louisville's night at wrestling. And then, of course, the Memphis Wrestling Story, Ohio Valley Wrestling, IWA Mid-South is all covered in there. That's one of my two latest releases. The other one is a book called The Girl with the Iron Jaw. It's a biography of a lady most people have never heard of. She wrestled from 50 to 57. Her name was Mars Bennett. She'd been a circus star and became a pinup queen in the late 40s and then became a pro wrestler. Died in 57 tragically of a car accident. Just an amazing life. I come across some of these people like her and Elvira Snodgrass and the Black Panther Jim Mitchell, and it's one of those things that's like, I'm going to write this story whether anybody buys this book or not, because I want to know their story, And with Mars, I was fortunate to get in touch with her niece and actually with her partner's daughter, and get a lot of photos and stories and personal stuff, not just the kayfabe things out of the old magazines. But those are my two latest releases. I've also done collaborated with Madman Pondo and his autobiography, Tracy Smothers' autobiography. If you don't buy this book, everybody dies. I did collaborated with Wahoo McDaniel's widow on his biography. I worked with Johnny Candido on a book about Chris Candido. Princess Victoria, who wrestled back in the early 80s, I worked with her on her autobiography. There's a number of others, some independent folks. I've published Mike Rogers' books about Portland wrestling, The Excitement in the Air, Volumes 1 and 2, and Katie Bar the Door. And if you like fiction, I've got fiction up there as well. It's all on the eatsleepwrestle.com. All my paperbacks are up there. There's some sci-fi, some horror, things like that. There's even a wrestling horror compilation. I've got two short novels that I wrote with Charlie Cruel and Ella, two up-and-coming independent lady wrestlers. And that's been released as a volume called The Darkest Side of the Ring, two short horror novels in one volume. So there's quite a bit at eatsleepwrestle.com. If you use the coupon code ESW at checkout, you can save yourself 10%. So come check out, see what I've got. Everything is signed by me or signed by the authors if possible. Just support indie publishers, support wrestling, and come check it out.
Nice. Thank you so much for taking time out and coming on here on the podcast and talking about My Life in Heaventown by J.J. Maguire and John Cosper. And social media, are you on social media? Would you like to
I am, yeah.
throw that
Folks
out
can
there?
find me on Facebook. You can look for Eat Sleep Wrestle on Facebook. Look for John Cosper Author on Instagram, and you can also find me at John Cosper on Twitter.
Nice. Thank you again, John, for taking time out and coming on here and talking about and keeping the memory alive of the true master of wrestling ring music, Hurricane J.J. Maguire. And that is it for this episode of the Everett Lee Show. I'll see you next time for another new episode. Peace.
Follow The Everett Lee Show on the following social media platforms: Facebook, The Everett Lee Show; Twitter, @The Everett _Lee; Instagram, Everett Lee. Subscribe, follow The Everett Lee Show on the following platforms: Podbean, Spotify, Stitcher Radio, iHeartRadio, iTunes, Amazon Music, YouTube, Everett Lee and Johners Podcast Network, WrestlingWithJohners.com. Follow Podcast City Network on the following social media platforms: on their website, Podcast City Net; Facebook, Podcast City Network; Twitter, @Podcast City Net.